Hi everyone, welcome to DIY with Nancy. Well, today I'm going to respond to a request. A lot of people have asked me to make my pineapple cake. In Portuguese we call it Bolo de Ananás. It's a pineapple cake made with some caramel sauce that I'm going to be making out of scratch. And you make this cake and you flip it and you get this upside down pineapple cake. It's super fluffy, delicious, and I'm going to show you how to make my pineapple cake, Bolo de Ananás, step by step.
Let's get started. For the first step, I'm going to caramelize the sugar and make the caramel. I'm placing 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar in a medium-sized saucepan. I'm going to turn the heat on a low to medium heat. I'm going to keep an eye on it, stir it occasionally until the sugar is caramelized. Now at this point, the sugar's been melting for about 5 minutes. I'm going to occasionally stir it. As you can see, there's still some sugar crystals. Very important to stay by the stove, constantly stir until the sugar is completely caramelized, and at that point, I'll show you the next step. Now altogether, it's taken about 8 minutes for the sugar to caramelize. Once it's caramelized, at this point, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of water and pour it gradually into the caramel. And you're going to consistently stir just as you see me doing it here. Now I'm going to do this for about 3 to 4 minutes until you see the caramel completely in a liquid form. And then at that point, I'll show you the next step. Now the caramel has been completely liquefied. You can see that it's bubbling on the top. When you see it at that point, your caramel is ready. You're going to set it aside for a few minutes, and then I'll show you the next step. Now here's the cake pan I'll be using. It's a 10-inch by 4-inch deep. So it's a fairly large pan. I'm going to place the caramel sauce in the pan and spread it evenly through the sides, the bottom, and in the center. I have my caramel in my cake pan. Using a spatula, I'm going to spread it evenly through the bottom, the sides, and the center. It's all ready. As you can see, I have my pan completely coated with the caramel, and you can see it in the center as well. And now I'm ready to move on to the next step. For the next ingredient, I have 12 slices of pineapple. They're canned pineapple. I have the juice as well. I have 1 cup of the pineapple juice. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to incorporate it into the recipe later on. For the next step, I'm going to take the pineapple slices, place them at the bottom of my cake pan. You're going to see that I'm going to fit about 6. Usually when I make this cake, I use this pan. It's a larger pan. But by all means, you can use a square pan, or you can even use a pan without the flute in the middle. So you can see I have 6 with spaces in between. In those spaces, I'm going to place the pineapple slices on the side of the cake pan, just as I'm doing here. And it gives it a beautiful effect. So this is effectively going to be the top of your cake once you flip it. Now, once you've placed your pineapples in your cake pan with the caramel, you're ready to set it aside and move on to the next step. Now, moving on to prepare the batter for the pineapple upside down cake. You will need 6 eggs, separating the yolks and the whites. Using a little technique that I learned many years ago, using my hands and letting the whites slide through my fingers, and they go right into the bowl with all the whites, and place my egg yolks in a separate bowl. Now I'm going to take the egg whites, set it aside. I'm going to use that later on the recipe. I'm going to start off by placing 1 1/2 cups of granulated sugar in a medium-sized bowl, and to that I'm going to add the 6 egg yolks. Once the egg yolks are in there, I'm going to use my hand mixer to do the mixing. I'm going to cream together the eggs and the sugar until I have a creamy mixture. I'm going to mix this for about 2 minutes, and then I'll show you the next step. I've been mixing it for about 2 minutes. I have a creamy mixture. At this point, I'm going to add 1 cup of pineapple juice. That will be the next ingredient. I'm going to mix that in, incorporate the pineapple juice into my creamy batter. Okay, I have my mixture of the pineapple juice eggs, and sugar. At this point, I'm just going to use a spatula just to scrape down the sides, make sure it's all incorporated. And at this point, I'm ready to add the dry ingredients. For the next step, I have the dry ingredients. I have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and here I have 1 tablespoon of baking powder. I'm going to pour the baking powder into the flour, give it a quick stir just to combine. And I'm going to take the dry ingredients, pour it into a sifter, and sift in the dry ingredients gradually. I'm going to sift the first part of the flour, and I'm going to give it a quick stir using a spatula, just as I'm doing here. You want to combine the flour into the batter. And now I'm going to just sift the second part of the flour and baking powder. Sift it in. And I'm just going to use my handheld whisk here to bring this batter together. So you want to incorporate the flour, make sure it's well combined, scrape down the sides of the bowl, and make sure all the flour is incorporated. And here you have the batter. And we need 2 more ingredients, so I'm going to set this aside and move on to the next step. The next step, I'm going to use my stand mixer with my whisk attachment. I'm going to add the 6 egg whites that I set aside earlier, and to that I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to place the stand mixer on a high speed, mix the egg whites until I get a stiff peak. Okay, my egg whites have reached the stiff peak. I could just look at it and tell, but if you're not sure, you can just take your whisk attachment and you could see that the egg whites will stick to the attachment just like that. And that point, you know you have your stiff peaks. Now we're ready to move on to the last and final step in combining the egg whites with the batter. So I'm going to place the egg whites in the batter gradually, and what I'm going to do is use my spatula to fold the egg whites into the batter. So you're going to get a really fluffy batter. So what I'm doing is pulling it from the bottom over to the top, and I'm going to use the same technique of folding the egg whites into the batter until all my egg whites are well combined, at which point we'll be able to move on to the last and final step. My batter is ready. I folded in all the egg whites. It's nice and fluffy, and I'm ready to move on to the last and final step in placing the batter into my prepared pan of caramel and pineapples. Now at this point, I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. My Bolo de Ananás pineapple cake is ready to go into the oven. I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 50 to 55 minutes. Voila, my pineapple cake Bolo de Ananás is out of the oven. I'm going to let it cool for 15 minutes and I'll show you the next step. I've had the pineapple cake cooling for approximately 15 minutes. The pan is still hot, but at this point I like to flip it over. Now before I do, I'm just going to use a small little spatula. You can also use a paring knife and just run it around the edges, just to make sure you're loosening up the cake from the pan. All right, now for the grand finale, I'm gonna flip the pineapple cake onto the cake plate. 1, 2, 3. Voila. Just straighten it out here. Oh wow, and look at that cake. The pan is clean. It's the perfect pineapple cake. As you can see, the pineapple slices fit perfectly onto the pan. It's a larger pan. I used a 10-inch pan. If you do use a smaller pan, you might have to cut the pineapple slices on the edges, which is fine too. And as you can see, it's perfect. It's nice and fluffy. And I'm gonna cut into it and show you how it looks like inside. Now let's cut into this beautiful pineapple cake. I'm gonna use a serrated knife. Wow. Look at that. A fluffy, soft pineapple cake. It's delicious. I'm gonna place it right here on a plate. Look how soft and fluffy the cake is. And that's my Bolo de Ananás pineapple cake. Now let's break into it. Look at that. That's how soft it is. So delicious, super fluffy. And I can tell you will definitely enjoy this Bolo de Ananás pineapple cake. This is a super fluffy Bolo de Ananás or pineapple cake. It's not difficult to make. There are a few steps, but the outcome is absolutely worth it. I hope you give this recipe a try.
And there you have it, everyone. That's my recipe for my Bolo de Ananás pineapple cake. A few tips: if you don't want to make your homemade caramel sauce, is fine. You don't have to use my recipe for the caramel sauce. You can use a store-bought caramel sauce, and that's what this is here. I just set it aside here so I can show everyone. It's called Caramelo. And this caramel, you can just pour it onto the cake pan, make sure it's evenly coated on the center and the sides, and then place your pineapple slices. But anyway, I just wanted to, that's one tip for this recipe. And the second one is, I used a 10x4 cake pan for this recipe. So it's a fairly large one. And I left the cake in the oven baking for about 50 to 55 minutes. I think it took it at the 53-minute mark to be exact. And then what I did is I just used a skewer, or you can use a toothpick, just to place it in the center of the cake to see that it's fully baked. If it is, then remove it. If not, then just leave it in the oven until your cake is fully baked. Anyway, that's my recipe for Bolo de Ananás and or pineapple cake. I can tell you this cake is super delicious. It's so fluffy. The pineapple flavor and the actual pineapple in itself is just out of this world. If you love pineapple, you want to try this recipe. So fluffy. So good. I hope you all enjoyed my recipe for Bolo de Ananás or pineapple cake. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Take care.